When this happens, and it will happen, you have 10 minutes to live. This sounds absolutely crazy, but it is not. And I tell you, there is even a disaster movie, 2015, The Wave, about this. Many people do not know that this is not just crazy Hollywood science fiction, because that movie has shocked the audiences with a story about a massive fjord tsunami that is destroying a tourist town with cruise ships in the harbor, 8,000 tourists on a busy day, and roughly 300 to 400 local residents a day. And most people don't know that that movie is based on a real mountain, Akernes in Norway. So right now, that mountain has a crack. That crack is over 230 feet, that's over 70 meters deep, and it is splitting the mountain apart. And we do know what that means. 54 million cubic meters of mountain could come down. And we have just seen this, unfortunately, in Alaska with the Tracy Arm landslide that caused, because these fjords are narrow, like a bathtub effect, a tsunami as high as 1,600 feet. And now, Tracy Arm, there was only the risk for the cruise ships, but thankfully there were no cruise ships there because it happened at 5-something a.m. But here, we do have towns and villages right there, and we do have a lot of cruise ships there. So you have to hear this, guys. This is probably, when this happens, not if, when this happens, the biggest landslide disaster potential ever. So right now, if the whole block fails, that whole mountain, towns like Geiranger have exactly 10 minutes. That's why I said 10 minutes to live, 10 minutes to evacuate before a wall of water crushes everything. That is not much. So what happens? And to give you a perspective, imagine 140 Empire State Buildings worth of rock plunges in a narrow, deep waterway. Hashtag Tracy Arm landslide. You get a localized mega tsunami at 150 miles per hour. That's 240 kilometers per hour. And I'll show you in the background what happened with the Tracy Arm landslide, the animation that the scientists have now released. And I'll show you how the other side of that valley looked. Mountains stripped away, vegetation stripped away, trees stripped away. Really, really scary. Imagine you are in there with your cruise ship. It's over and out. So localized mega tsunami, yes, because it's a fjord. But if localized means I have cruise ships and villages there, this is a big, big problem. This is the reality, guys, that is facing Western Norway at the Akernes slope. So we will look at the numbers. The 2,950 foot, that's 900 meters high mountain, we will look at 1.9 billion cubic feet, that's 54 million cubic meters of mass, and then the terrifying physics of water displacement that make fjord tsunamis, not only in Norway, also Alaska, for example, behave like a massive explosion. So a regular evacuation is impossible. Once the slide begins, forget about it, right? So I will explain to you how Norway has a 72-hour warning system and how this works and how this compares to the recent historic landslide in Tracy Arm in Alaska. Because right now, this Akernes Mountain in Norway is actively ripping itself apart. We have to say it. At 1.9 billion cubic feet, that is sliding, moving towards the water. We have seen Blutten. There wasn't water. But look at what happened to Blutten, right? A year after the catastrophe. When this fails, guys, it will trigger a catastrophic 300-foot, almost 100-meter tsunami that will destroy entire cities in less than 10 minutes. So the real-life science here is far more terrifying than the fiction, than the movie. Geologists aren't guessing if it will happen. We're beyond that. They're actively listening to the mountain collapse right now. And here's how Norway is preparing for this unavoidable, as we like to say here on this channel, shizzy's hitting the fizzy. You have to listen to that. I'll line that out, what's going to happen here. Do me a favor, give me a hype and a like with this video. Do it early, doesn't cost you anything, helps my channel. Thank you so much. To the millions of tourists who visit every year fjords in Norway, in Alaska, it looks like paradise. But to scientists and geologists, it's a ticking time bomb. Slicing through the mountain is what they call the Akernes Mountain. That is a terrifying crack over 230 feet, 70 meters deep. Splicing it up from the mountain as if you use a piece of axe in the wood and then you hit with a hammer on the axe. You're splitting it more and more and more. Every single year, gravity pulls this massive wedge there up to 4 inches. This is 10 centimeters closer to the water. And you might say, oh, is that slow? Yeah, no, because it's sliding closer to the water, but it doesn't mean it's for years it'll do the same movement. No, there is a trigger point when the whole shizzy, I almost said the real word, is hitting the water, the fizzy in that note, I have to say. So the primary culprit, well, water, rain, melting snow fill this crack. They fill it up. So that creates immense hydrostatic pressure that basically literally pushes the mountain off its foundation. And let's look at the numbers. The unstable block is 0.75 miles. That's 1.2 kilometers long. This is huge, right? It stands up to 2,950 feet, 900 meters above sea level. So when this thing loses grip, 1.9 billion cubic feet, 54 million cubic meters of rock, the weight of over 140 Empire State Buildings will plunge into the, and I've practiced this word, guys, Fjord in there. Let's call it the water that is there in this fjord. I don't want to have to say the word again. So it hits the fjord like a brick dropped into a bathtub or your leg, something like this. Do this in your bathtub. Do this. Put your leg in there. You see what happens to the edges of the bathtub. And that's how these narrow fjords work. But in the fjords, it's amplified because the fjord is incredibly narrow and deep. And the displacement of water is instant, right? The kinetic energy has nowhere to go but straight up these vertical rock walls. So this is the Tracy Arm mega tsunami scenario, right? The Tracy Arm mega tsunami is the proof. What will happen? So if you think a narrow fjord layout basically safe keeps you from a 300-foot wave, like, okay, Japan, 2011 Tohoku earthquakes. These are ocean waves, ocean tsunamis. That is something different, right? The recent history in these fjords proves that they're exponentially more dangerous. So just last year, August 10th, 2025, a mountain above Tracy Arm Fjord in Alaska suffered a sudden colossal collapse. Over 2.2 billion cubic feet, 64 million cubic meters of rock plunged into the water all at once. So this is a comparable size. The result was the second highest tsunami ever recorded in human history because the fjord walls were so tight. The displaced water basically exploded upwards, surging to this incredible height of 481 meters or 1,580 feet up the opposite mountain wall that is higher than the Empire State Building, by the way. So the wave also tore through the waterway at 150 miles per hour. That is 240 kilometers per hour, completely stripping the landscape down to bare rock and clear-cutting entire forests. So I mentioned it, 5:30 a.m. in the morning. Just a few hours later, it would have struck an area packed with multiple cruise ships carrying thousands of tourists. So Norway knows it might not get that lucky. So what happens to these cities there when Akernes fails? The impact will trigger a localized mega tsunami in the immediate area. The wave will tower up to 300 feet, they think 90 meters high. Can you run on foot? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The wave travels through the fjord channels at speeds exceeding 150 miles per hour, 240 kilometers per hour. You cannot outrun it. You cannot outdrive it. There's no German Autobahn there. You can't. So exactly 10 minutes, guys. 10 minutes. And you lose minutes until you even realize what's happening. So that is all the time that the town of Geiranger has from the moment the rock hits the water until the wave strikes. So when it arrives, the water will have bottlenecked through the narrow fjord, driving a wall of water up 80 to 100 feet, 25 to 30 meters high, straight into the town. The damage will be, we have to call it absolute. I say the damage will be absolute. The force of the water will instantly smash through the lower floors of the modern concrete hotels that are there. Classic wooden homes, they will be torn from their foundations. They'll just washed away, and they will be washed into splinters, right? So the massive cruise ships that are docked, they're docking there quite often in the bay, will be lifted like plastic toys. They will be thrown inland or crushed against the valley walls. Sounds crazy, guys, but this is what it is. The water will surge hundreds of yards, meters inland also, swallowing up everything in its path before dragging the debris and the wreckage back out into the deep fjord. This is what happens then also. So what is the technology that is being used there? They call it listening to the dead because the stakes are so high. Akernes is arguably the most monitored mountain on Earth. It is. Did you know that? Unlike the unmonitored slope at Tracy Arm that caught basically the world entirely by surprise, geologists have turned this Norwegian rock, we have to say, into a living lab. So they use continuous GPS to track like the fraction of an inch, like millimeter level shifts. Automated lasers shoot beams across the chasm 24/7. So, and most fascinatingly, they use geophones to actually listen to the mountain. Why? Microfractures is the name. There's microfractures inside the rock and they emit tiny acoustic pings. So when the mountain starts making more noise, geologists know that the friction is giving way. Let's talk about the evacuation, the hopeful 72-hour window that they think they will have. So they have designed a bulletproof early warning system so nobody will be caught in that 10-minute, we have to say, death window. It is. So when the red alert hits, sirens wail across the valleys, automated text messages blast to every cell phone in the zone. Locals, they know exactly where to run high up into the mountains above the designated tsunami line. And I would even run higher because you never know, right? With Bloodton, they miscalculated it too. So they lost one shepherd, right? Only one person, they evacuated up front, but they miscalculated it, right? So everything is marked out on local safety maps. Everyone must be out long before the rock falls in an ideal scenario. Can we fix this mountain slide? Can we explode it or something like that? No. Instead of just waiting to run, scientists are trying a radical fix, actually. They want to drain the mountain. They're drilling massive tunnels to pump water out of the crack, so that the crack is not expanding, right? So they hope to relieve the pressure and basically lock the mountain back in place. But the question here is, will engineering triumph over gravity? I have my doubts. I really do. I think this Tracy Arm style collapse is inevitable for Norway, but time will tell. And if you are interested in that, check out my video here in the end screen. There is weird things happening with Mother Earth, thus with earthquakes. What you see there is a kitchen swirl earthquake. You've never seen footage like this before. So really, really check it out. And if you're interested in all of that, please subscribe. Thank you for everyone who did and for everyone who's here as a member, as support, sending me coffee and supers. You guys are awesome. And again, if you haven't seen it, meet in the next one. This is crazy, I promise. Bye-bye.